The night before my wedding, I unlocked the bridal suite and found my fiancée wearing her veil for another man. Bianca Cresswell sat on the edge of the bed with one hand buried in Trent Holloway's hair. His jacket lay across the champagne bucket. Her wedding dress had been unfastened halfway down the back, and the rose petals I had ordered were crushed beneath his shoes. For several seconds, none of us moved. The suite occupied the top floor of the Halcyon Hotel. Beyond the windows, the river carried reflected city lights toward the sea. Downstairs, our families were hosting a rehearsal dinner for 400 guests. I still held the small velvet box containing my mother's wedding brooch. It slipped from my fingers and landed on the carpet. Bianca looked at the box, then at me. She did not cover herself. She did not apologize. "You arrived early," she said. Trent stood and buttoned his shirt. He had the decency to look afraid, which was more decency than he had shown 5 minutes earlier. "The florist finished ahead of schedule," I replied. My voice sounded calm. That surprised all three of us. Bianca adjusted the strap of her dress. "Then close the door. The hallway has cameras." I stepped inside and let the door close, not to protect her reputation, but to hear the truth without a crowd shaping it. "How long?" Trent opened his mouth. Bianca answered first. "Does it matter? It determines which financial records my attorney requests." Her expression changed by a fraction. "You are talking about attorneys now? We were supposed to sign a marriage license tomorrow. Tonight I found you in our suite with the son of the financier trying to buy your father's company. Yes, I am talking about attorneys." Trent stepped between us with a performance of concern. "Cyrus, we didn't plan for you to discover this way. Which discovery method did you plan?" He glanced at Bianca. She gave a bored sigh. "I wanted one final night before becoming the respectable Mrs. Renwick. Trent understands excitement. You understand balance sheets." I looked at the woman I had known since I was 12. She used to call me Ledger Boy whenever I corrected her homework. At 16, she upgraded the nickname to House Dog because my father worked for hers. At 30, hours before our wedding, she still believed my ability to clean up her family's disasters made me harmless. "Were you ever planning to stop seeing him?" I asked. Bianca smiled. "You cannot be serious. Our marriage is a business arrangement. My father chose you because you keep the group alive. I chose you because you are predictable. What I do privately has nothing to do with your role." "My role?" "You manage the company. You stand beside me at events. You make difficult people disappear from meetings. In return, you receive the Cresswell name and everything my father gave you." Trent's confidence returned. "Think before reacting. A scandal tomorrow would hurt the share price. You are too responsible to burn your own work over something personal." That sentence explained why they had chosen the bridal suite. They believed responsibility was a leash. My phone rested inside my jacket with the voice recorder running. I had activated it in the elevator after receiving an anonymous message telling me to visit the suite alone. Depending on local consent rules, the recording might never enter court. It did not need to. I wanted an exact record for myself, because people like Bianca could rewrite a conversation before the door finished closing. I picked up my mother's brooch. "The wedding is canceled," Bianca laughed. "No, it is not. My attorney will notify yours within the hour. The hotel will receive written instructions. Guests will be informed before midnight." She crossed the room and stopped inches from me. "You will do no such thing. My father paid for your education after Walter went to prison. He brought you into our home. Every title you have came from us. Every title I have came with board minutes and employment contracts. Do not play executive with me, Cyrus. Tomorrow you marry me. After that, you can return to pretending you matter." I opened the door. "Get dressed. The reservation ends at midnight." Trent frowned. "This suite belongs to Bianca. It is leased to me through tomorrow's event contract. The hotel can explain occupancy law. I will not." I walked away without touching either of them. In the elevator, my hands finally began to shake. I called Naomi Greer first. Naomi had represented me separately during the prenuptial negotiations. That decision offended the Cresswells at the time. It saved me now. "I found Bianca with Trent in the suite," I said. "Are you physically safe?" "Yes." "Did you threaten anyone, enter a device, or remove property that is not yours?" "No." "Good. Go to the lobby. Stay in public. Forward me the hotel contract and the prenuptial drafts. Do not post anything. My second call went to Sabine Holt, Chief Financial Officer of Meridian Forge, the materials company I had built beside Cresswell Meridian Group. "Activate separation protocol," I told her. She was silent for half a breath. "Confirmed. Personal guarantees first? All guarantees and bridge facilities under my name, subject to notice periods. Freeze new intercompany transactions. Preserve every message from Cresswell executives. Call the independent directors for 6 in the morning." What triggered it? "The wedding is off." Sabine did not ask why. "I'll start the notices." Separation protocol was not a revenge button. It had taken 14 months to design with lawyers, lenders, auditors, and minority shareholders. Cresswell Meridian had become dangerously dependent on my personal guarantees, patents licensed from Meridian Forge, and supplier relationships negotiated through my office. Conrad Cresswell's stroke 8 months earlier exposed how little governance existed beneath the family image. I proposed a legal restructuring to protect employees if the parent group failed. Bianca signed the preliminary resolutions without reading them. She thought they were wedding preparations for the company. At 11:15, Naomi joined me in a private lobby office provided by hotel security. We reviewed the event agreements. The bridal suite would remain available to Bianca until midnight, after which management could ask all occupants to leave. No dramatic removal, no public humiliation. If she refused, the hotel would follow its normal procedure. Naomi sent cancellation notices to both families, the officiant, vendors, and the marriage registrar. The message disclosed no affair. It said only that the ceremony would not proceed and guests should not travel. "Do you want to state a reason?" she asked. "Not until we verify how long Trent had access to company information." Good. The answer felt terrible. It was still correct. At 11:40, Bianca entered the lobby wearing a coat over her gown. Trent followed with both suitcases. She marched toward me while hotel employees carefully kept guests away. "You actually canceled it," she said. "Yes. My mother has been calling me. The decorators are packing the ballroom. Do you understand what you have done?" Ended an engagement. Over one night. Over your decision and your explanation of it. Trent lowered his voice. "Cyrus, we can sign a confidentiality agreement. Nobody benefits from escalation." Naomi stepped beside me. "Direct all proposals through counsel." Bianca recognized her and sneered. "You brought your own lawyer to our prenup because you never trusted me." "I brought my own lawyer because trust is not legal representation." "You think paperwork protects you from my father?" Conrad's name still carried weight. Few people outside the board knew that he could no longer identify the year, much less direct the corporation. A court-appointed guardian oversaw his medical decisions. The board had named me interim chief executive after his stroke. Bianca attended one meeting, stayed 19 minutes, and left for a yacht party. I did not use his illness to threaten her. "Your father is receiving licensed care," I said. "We will discuss the group at a properly noticed board meeting. I will discuss you with him tomorrow. Ask his guardian to arrange a visit." For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. She had not visited Conrad in 7 months. Trent placed a hand at her back. "Come on, my car is waiting." The hotel had already deactivated the wedding transportation accounts. Trent paid for the car himself. As they left, Bianca turned. "You will beg before the shareholders finish with you." I watched the doors close. "Will he?" Naomi asked. "No." That was not my question. I looked at her. "Will Trent stay after he sees the debt schedule?" For the first time that night, I almost smiled. Not voluntarily. The Cresswell family had not built its empire through brilliant manufacturing. Conrad's father began with warehouses near the northern port. Conrad expanded into specialty metals, industrial coatings, and defense components through political favors, concealed liabilities, and aggressive acquisitions. By the time I joined the group at 22, its public image was magnificent, and its internal controls were almost non-existent. I fixed what I could. I consolidated procurement, closed unsafe plants, renegotiated debt, and created a compliance division that reported directly to the audit committee. Profits tripled in 6 years. The board rewarded me with performance shares and authority. Conrad told everyone he had trained me. In reality, he mostly instructed me to protect Bianca's inheritance. My connection to his family began 18 years earlier. My mother, Margot Renwick, was a process safety engineer at a Cresswell coatings plant. She discovered that the company imported restricted catalysts under false customs codes and stored them beside residential districts. Her report warned that one damaged valve could release toxic gas across 2 neighborhoods. 3 days before she planned to meet regulators, her car went over a mountain barrier. Police called it driver error. My father, Walter, worked in Cresswell's compliance office. After Margot died, investigators charged him with falsifying customs records. He accepted a plea and went to prison. Conrad promised to pay for my schooling and keep me safe. For years, I believed that was guilt. Later, I understood it was supervision. Living around the Cresswells taught me to remain useful and invisible. Bianca was 2 years younger than me and treated gratitude like a family currency. At school, she made me carry project materials, complete group assignments, and wait outside parties in case she needed a ride. If I refused, she reminded everyone that my father was a criminal and Conrad fed me. Adults called her spoiled. Nobody called the behavior what it was because her surname funded buildings. Walter encouraged obedience from prison. His letters repeated the same message. Conrad gave you a future. Do not make trouble. Repay kindness with loyalty. I tried. At 25, I stopped trying to earn Bianca's respect and began documenting why the Cresswell empire feared questions. The evidence was incomplete. A suspicious death from 18 years earlier required more than anger and corporate rumors. I needed original safety reports, payment records, vehicle data, and witnesses who could survive cross-examination. So I built power in daylight while investigating in silence. The engagement was Bianca's idea, encouraged by Conrad before his stroke. She said marriage would make my leadership legitimate to family investors. I agreed because it gave Naomi access to family disclosures during prenup negotiations and placed dormant trusts under formal review. I had also loved her once, or believed I did. Familiarity can imitate love when you have never been free enough to compare it with anything else. The prenup negotiations revealed accounts linked to Trent's father, Malcolm Holloway, an overseas private equity financier known for hostile acquisitions. Bianca insisted they were ordinary investments. Sabine found otherwise. Over 2 years, Bianca approved $86 million in market development transfers to consulting companies controlled by Trent. The payments bypassed procurement rules. Some funded luxury properties and speculative trades. Others vanished through offshore entities. We reported the pattern to the audit committee 4 months before the wedding. Independent counsel began a confidential review. Bianca did not know because she was one of the subjects. The affair did not create the investigation. It told me the investigation had reached my home. At 2 in the morning, Sabine sent the first separation protocol report. Every lender had acknowledged notice. Meridian Forge would stop extending unsecured credit to Cresswell Meridian after the contractual grace period. Patent licenses remained active for existing orders, but could not cover new production until overdue fees were paid. No employee would lose a paycheck overnight. The group had 72 hours to present accurate liquidity information. At 2:15, my father called from prison. Walter was scheduled for release the following afternoon after serving the final year of his sentence in a work transition program. I heard the wedding was canceled, he said. News traveled fast, even behind walls. Yes. Was it your decision? Mine and Bianca's, separately. Conrad will be humiliated. His first concern still belonged to the Cresswells. Conrad cannot understand the ceremony, I said. His doctors documented advanced vascular impairment. Do not speak about him that way. He looked after you while I was gone. He monitored me while you served a sentence for his records. Silence came through the line. You promised not to reopen that, Walter said. I promised nothing. I stopped discussing it because every conversation frightened you. Cyrus, gratitude is the only dignity men like us have. No, truth is. The call ended awkwardly. I did not tell him what awaited the next day. I wanted him outside the prison before deciding how much he could bear. At dawn, the independent directors entered a secure video meeting. Sabine presented the liquidity problem, suspicious transfers, inventory irregularities, and my conflict disclosure concerning the canceled wedding. I recused myself from votes directly involving Bianca. The audit committee placed her spending authority on temporary hold, demanded device preservation, and scheduled an emergency board meeting for 48 hours later. Outside counsel notified financial regulators because several transfers could qualify as misappropriation and false reporting. The decisions appeared in written minutes. No shareholder acted because I whispered revenge into a phone. They acted because the numbers had signatures. At 8, I informed senior employees that the wedding was canceled and business operations would continue. I prohibited gossip on company systems and established a hotline for anyone pressured to delete records. At 9, Bianca arrived at headquarters with Trent and an appointment letter signed by Conrad 6 days before his stroke. She entered my office without knocking. "Move," she said. "This room belongs to my family." I remained behind the desk. Naomi sat near the window. Sabine stood beside a screen displaying the board notice. Trent dropped the appointment letter in front of me. It named him special advisor to the chair with authority over international finance. "Conrad wanted me here months ago," he said. "Bianca has activated the appointment." "The letter was never approved by the board," Naomi replied. "It grants no signing authority." Bianca glared at her. "This is a family company." Sabine spoke calmly. "It is a publicly held company with lenders, employees, and fiduciary duties." "Who invited the accountant?" "The audit committee." Trent pulled out a chair. "Enough theater. Cyrus, you managed operations well. Nobody denies that. But your emotional reaction has created instability. Resign before the board removes you, and Malcolm may allow Meridian Forge to keep several supplier contracts. Your father is not a party to those contracts. He will be after the acquisition." There it was, the plans spoken aloud. Bianca intended to marry me for operational stability, while Trent's family accumulated influence through hidden transfers and debt. Whether she meant to abandon the wedding later no longer mattered. She had used both men for different functions. I looked at the appointment letter. "Trent, did you enter this building using a temporary guest badge?" He frowned. "Yes." "Then return it to reception. Your proposed appointment is suspended pending the audit, and you have no legitimate business here." Bianca struck the desk with her palm. "You cannot remove him!" "Security can remove any unauthorized visitor." Trent stood slowly. "This confidence will be expensive. Your consulting invoices were more expensive." His face tightened. Security escorted them to the elevator without force. Bianca shouted that she would replace the entire board. Sabine waited until the doors closed on the camera feed. "She owns 9% directly," she said. "The family trust holds another 14%, but Conrad's guardian controls it during incapacity. She cannot replace a doorman." "Do not underestimate desperate people," Naomi warned. I looked at the frozen image of Trent's expression. He had not expected me to know about the invoices. That meant Malcolm did not yet know how far the audit had reached. We needed the next 48 hours. I met Walter outside the correctional center at 3 the next afternoon. He carried a canvas bag containing 2 shirts, a chess book, and 23 years of institutional routine. His hair had gone completely white. He paused when he saw my car, not with admiration, but suspicion. "Whose is that?" he asked. "Mine." "Do the Cresswells know you took it?" "I bought it 4 years ago." He looked through the windshield at Sabine in the front passenger seat. She had insisted on accompanying me because reporters waited near my apartment. "This is Sabine Holt, Meridian Forge's chief financial officer," I said. "She helped arrange the transition apartment." Walter nodded too deeply. "Thank you for looking after my son." Sabine opened her door. "Mr. Renwick, your son employs me. He looks after the financial systems. I only found the apartment." Walter seemed confused by a world in which the hierarchy did not place a Cresswell at the top. The transition apartment belonged to a non-profit for people leaving long sentences. Walter had a private room, a counselor, transportation support, and no obligation to live with me before either of us was ready. During the drive, he watched the city like a person viewing a country that had replaced itself. "Are we going to Conrad's house?" he asked. "No." "I should thank him." "You can decide after you understand his condition and the current investigation." He turned sharply. "Investigation?" I told him about the false customs declarations, the transfers to Holloway companies, and the audit. I did not yet mention Margot's crash. His breathing changed whenever her name approached the conversation. "Conrad made mistakes," he said. "Men responsible for thousands of workers make difficult choices. He let you accept a felony conviction for records you did not create. I signed them. After he threatened to report Mom as the mastermind and leave me without either parent?" Walter stared at me. "Who told you that?" "Your first attorney's notes?" The attorney had died years earlier. His files survived in storage. Naomi obtained them with Walter's written consent during release planning, before he understood what they contained. Walter's hands tightened around the canvas bag. Conrad paid that lawyer. Exactly. At the apartment, the counselor showed Walter his room and explained the schedule. Nobody called him a criminal, servant, or charity case. The ordinary respect made him more uncomfortable than contempt would have. Before I left, he caught my sleeve. Cyrus, do not destroy yourself fighting them. I am trying to stop them from destroying more people. That is what your mother said. Before she died? His face closed. I am tired. I let him rest. Bianca spent the same afternoon trying to reach Conrad. His medical guardian, retired Judge Imogen Vane, permitted a supervised visit at the neurological residence. Bianca brought Trent and a stack of corporate resolutions. Imogen refused to let the documents enter the room. Conrad sat beside a window, sorting wooden blocks by color. He recognized Bianca as a familiar person, but called her Beatrice, his late sister's name. When she demanded he remove me as interim executive, he asked whether I still needed help with school tuition. Bianca lasted 9 minutes. Outside, she accused the physician of drugging him and threatened the residence's license. Imogen documented every word. Trent urged Bianca to seek emergency control of the family trust by claiming Conrad had verbally named her successor. The trust required a medical capacity certification and approval from 2 independent trustees. Neither existed. They contacted Malcolm instead. At 6, Holloway Capital quietly purchased Cresswell Meridian bonds trading at a discount. By evening, it had acquired enough debt to become a significant creditor, not an owner. Malcolm planned to use the position to force liquidation on terms favorable to his funds. Sabine saw the trades through market disclosures. He is moving earlier than expected, she said, because Trent knows the consulting records are exposed. Should we announce the audit? Not until independent counsel authorizes it. We cannot use incomplete allegations to manipulate the bond price. We informed regulators privately and continued preserving evidence. The emergency board meeting began the following morning at 8. 11 directors attended in person. Conrad's guardian joined by video as observer. Bianca arrived with personal counsel after Naomi warned that Trent could not enter. She wore a white suit instead of the wedding dress. News outlets had already photographed her leaving the halcyon with him, but no confirmed account of the affair existed. Bianca took her father's usual chair. Imogen spoke through the screen. That seat is reserved for the chair. Mr. Cresswell remains chair but is medically unable to attend. It does not transfer by blood. Bianca moved 1 seat to the left, furious. I opened the meeting with a conflict disclosure. The canceled marriage created personal hostility, so I would present operational facts, but abstain from decisions about Bianca's status or the audit findings. She laughed. You humiliate me publicly and pretend to be ethical in minutes. The cancellation notice gave no reason. Everyone knows. Then ask whoever told them. Her eyes flicked toward her attorney. Sabine presented the liquidity report. Cresswell Meridian appeared to hold assets worth $640 million. After verification, the realizable value was less than half. The first problem was inventory. For 3 years, subsidiaries shipped unfinished metal sheets between warehouses and recorded each movement as a new sale. Goods worth $40 million appeared on consolidated reports as $170 million in revenue. Bianca had signed quarterly certifications as executive director. I signed what Cyrus's department prepared, she said. My department flagged the entries, Sabine replied. Here are the emails requesting correction. Your office overrode them through Trent Holloway's consulting account. The screen displayed the audit trail. Bianca's counsel asked for a recess. The board denied it until the presentation ended. The second problem was secured debt. The family's 2 largest production plants were pledged to 3 lenders under cross-default clauses. Conrad authorized the first loan. Bianca authorized the next 2 while he was hospitalized. The applications claimed the factories were unencumbered even though land records showed the earlier lien. One signature had been electronically copied. Trent handled those applications, Bianca said. Did he have formal authority? A director asked. He advised me. So you signed false documents on advice from a man with no appointment? She had no useful answer. The third problem involved customer concentration. 5 major aerospace clients represented 60% of profitable orders. Their contracts required audited safety compliance. Cresswell's plants failed 2 inspections after managers concealed chemical leaks. I had not stolen those customers. They issued cure notices 6 months earlier. The board authorized Meridian Forge to license compliant facilities and fulfill emergency orders as a subcontractor. Bianca approved the arrangement because it preserved revenue while she assumed she would inherit both companies through marriage. With the wedding canceled, Meridian Forge remained independent. Customers could choose whether to renew with Cresswell after the cure period. 4 had already chosen not to. "You planned this," Bianca said. "I planned for safety failures to stop poisoning customer contracts. You built Meridian Forge using our resources." Sabine displayed capitalization records. "My performance compensation, bank financing, employee investment, and licensed patents had funded it. Every related party transaction received board and lender approval. Outside valuations confirmed market terms. The structure had been designed precisely because I knew someone would someday make Bianca's accusation." The final report concerned cash. Cresswell Meridian owed $112 million within 30 days. It held $12 million in unrestricted funds. My personal guarantees supported a revolving facility covering $45 million. Separation protocol did not erase that loan. It notified the bank I would not renew the guarantee after the current term. Without accurate collateral statements, the lender could demand additional security. "You are pulling support because I slept with someone," Bianca said. I looked directly at her. "I am declining to guarantee debts for a company whose director concealed an affair with the beneficiary of suspicious payments, and then told me our marriage existed to keep me working. The audit began before the affair. The guarantee ends under its written terms." Several directors looked away from Bianca. She had forced the subject into the record. I answered without unnecessary detail. The board appointed an independent restructuring officer, suspended Bianca from all executive functions, and continued the audit. It authorized negotiations with lenders for a supervised reorganization rather than immediate liquidation. Employees would be paid first from available cash under applicable law. I supported those measures, but abstained from votes involving my company. Bianca's 9% could not stop them. When the meeting ended, she remained in her chair. "You built this company for me," she said quietly. "You told my father you would make it safe for my return." I was 24 and still believed service would earn belonging. So all those years meant nothing? They meant I know exactly which parts are worth saving. "And me?" "You are not a division on a restructuring chart." For the first time, her arrogance failed to produce a response. Her attorney led her out. Walter waited in the lobby. He had arrived without telling me. The transition counselor sat nearby. A television above reception displayed business news about the board meeting. Bianca recognized him from old photographs. "Uncle Walter," she said, instantly adopting the sweet tone she used around people whose loyalty she considered inherited. "You are finally home." Walter stood. His shoulders curved forward from decades of making himself smaller. "Miss Bianca, your son has become confused. Tell him who paid for everything he has." His eyes moved from her to me. The lobby went quiet. Years earlier, the source of our family's humiliation would have been his gratitude. He would have apologized for me before understanding the accusation. He almost did it again. Then Bianca added, "A kennel should teach its dogs not to bite the owner." Walter's expression changed. "My son is not a dog," he said. The words came softly, but they held. Bianca blinked. "Your father used to understand jokes." I understood threats and called them kindness. He straightened by an inch. "That was my failure. It will not become his duty." He turned away from her. The counselor guided him toward the exit. I followed after instructing security to preserve lobby footage but not release it. Outside, Walter's hands trembled. "I should have said that when you were 12, he told me. "You said it today. That does not repair the years." "No, but it tells me what you want to do with the next ones." He nodded, unable to speak. The restructuring officers spent the next week negotiating with lenders. Malcolm Holloway opposed every extension. His fund purchased more discounted bonds and demanded an immediate auction of the 2 plants. His motive was not mysterious. Holloway Capital already owned a competing overseas supplier. If Cresswell's facilities closed, Malcolm could take its customers and equipment cheaply. Bianca publicly supported him. She and Trent held a press conference claiming I had engineered a false crisis to steal her inheritance. Behind them, a banner announced a Cresswell Renewal Committee, funded by Holloway Capital. Trent presented himself as future chief executive. He promised to restore the wedding-era prosperity of a ceremony that never occurred. Reporters questioned Bianca about the hotel photographs. She called them private manipulation and accused me of installing cameras inside the suite. That accusation was dangerous and false. The Halcyon released a limited statement confirming that no room cameras existed and that guest records had been preserved under court order. Naomi filed a defamation notice, but advised against a public argument. "Their finances are collapsing," she said. "Do not turn the story into jealous people shouting about a bedroom. The bedroom is how Trent gained her trust. Then prove what he did with that access." The audit did. Forensic analysts recovered messages between Bianca and Trent discussing lender applications. He told her which pages to sign and promised Malcolm's fund would refinance the group after our marriage. In exchange, Bianca would transfer voting proxies over her personal shares to a Holloway entity. One message from Bianca read, "Cyrus will fix the numbers. He always does." Trent replied, "Then keep him happy until the license is signed." The affair had not merely betrayed a relationship. It had placed a hostile bidder inside confidential financing discussions. We submitted the messages to regulators and the restructuring officer. Bianca claimed they were romantic jokes. Banks rarely accept jokes as collateral disclosures. The primary lender issued a default notice based on false representations. Rather than seizing immediately, it petitioned for court-supervised administration. That protected operations from individual creditor attacks while an administrator evaluated sales. Employees continued working, insurance remained active, orders at safe plants continued. The Cresswell family lost control, but the company did not disappear overnight. At the first creditor hearing, Meridian Forge submitted a bid for the compliant facilities, patents, and employee contracts. Two competitors submitted bids as well. An independent bank ran the process. I could not simply take the best assets because I wanted them. Meridian Forge won after offering the highest combination of cash, assumed environmental obligations, and guaranteed jobs. Proceeds went to secured creditors and remediation funds, not to me personally. The unsafe plants were placed under environmental supervision. Executives who falsified reports were removed. Workers received claims for unpaid bonuses. Cresswell Meridian's glamorous headquarters went up for sale. Bianca watched the auction results from a rented conference room at Holloway Capital. Her personal card still worked. Her apartment still belonged to her trust. She had not become penniless because I canceled a wedding. What she lost was the illusion that a surname could command assets owned by creditors, employees, and public shareholders. Trent stayed beside her because Malcolm still needed her 9%. That loyalty had an expiration date. Bianca's next move targeted my legitimacy rather than the restructuring. She released my father's conviction records and photographs of me entering the Cresswell estate as a child. Her statement claimed Conrad rescued the son of a criminal, educated me, and received betrayal in return. The documents were genuine. The interpretation was not. Within hours, business channels repeated the phrase, "convicted smuggler's son." Commentators asked whether I had created Meridian Forge using confidential Cresswell information. Former classmates posted stories about Bianca calling me her servant. Some treated the humiliation as proof I should be grateful. Others finally recognized it as abuse. Sabine wanted to publish every independent audit proving Meridian Forge's origins. Naomi stopped her. "Release verified ownership records, yes. Do not litigate Walter's criminal case through social media while a homicide inquiry may reopen." Walter sat across from us in Naomi's office. He had agreed to hear the full outline of what I knew about Margot's death. The table held 3 folders. The first contained the original accident report. Margot supposedly lost control on a dry mountain road at moderate speed. Photographs showed a second paint color on the rear bumper and a brake line cut cleanly after impact. The investigating officer removed both details from the final summary. The second held payments from a Cresswell security subsidiary to that officer, a towing company, and a mechanic. The payments occurred within 10 days of the crash and were disguised as emergency consulting fees. The third contained customs records Walter had been convicted of falsifying. Digital timestamps showed they were altered from an executive account after he was arrested. "Why didn't my appeal lawyer have this?" Walter asked. "Conrad selected your first attorney. The second appeal focused on sentencing, not innocence. By then, the company said source files had been destroyed. Walter touched the photograph of Margot's car, but pulled his hand away before contact. You said homicide inquiry. Naomi gave the evidence to Special Prosecutor Freya Dalton 3 months ago. Her team is verifying it independently. We did not have enough to seek charges. And now? The financial audit may reveal the security payment's true source. Walter stood and walked to the window. There is something else, he said. He had carried a key through 23 years in prison. It was not hidden inside a dramatic secret compartment. Correctional property officers recorded it at intake and returned it with his belongings. Walter wore it on a cord beneath his shirt because Margot had given it to him 2 weeks before she died. She rented a bank box in both our names, he said. After the crash, Conrad told me the police would charge her too. He said if I opened the box or spoke about her reports, he would make sure you entered state care under another name. I believed him. Why keep the key? Because throwing it away felt like killing her a second time. Naomi did not reach for it. The prosecutor should arrange the opening under warrant and chain of custody procedures. If we open it privately, the defense will attack every item. Walter closed his fingers around the key. Then call her. Freya Dalton arrived with 2 investigators, a bank representative, and a forensic technician. Walter signed consent while Naomi documented that no Cresswell or Meridian Forge employee touched the box. Inside, they found Margot's original safety report, handwritten meeting notes, a microcassette, and a sealed envelope addressed to Walter. The report described restricted catalyst shipments entering through a shell importer named North Key Trading. One handwritten note identified Conrad and Malcolm Holloway as the beneficial owners. Malcolm was not a surprise villain arriving after his son failed. His name had been in Margot's file 18 years before he began buying Cresswell debt. The cassette contained part of a meeting. Margot confronted Conrad about the false customs codes. A second male voice warned her that regulators would find Walter's signature on whatever survives. Voice comparisons suggested Malcolm, but prosecutors needed confirmation. The envelope to Walter was personal. If anything happens to me, Margot had written, do not confess to protect Cyrus. Conrad will call it sacrifice, because sacrifice is cheaper than truth. Take our son somewhere he can grow without owing his breath to another family. Walter read the lines twice. Then he sat on the bank floor and cried without sound. I did not tell him everything was forgiven. That would have made his pain convenient for me. I sat beside him until he could stand. Freya sealed every item. The evidence strengthened the case, but still did not prove who forced Margot's car from the road or who cut the brake line. We need the operational link, she said. A payment, a vehicle record, a participant, or original communication placing an order. The towing company's owner is dead, Naomi said. The officer claims memory loss. Walter wiped his face. There was a fleet dispatcher named Orrin Beck. Margot trusted him. He disappeared after the funeral. I knew the name. Orrin had sent anonymous safety tips to Meridian Forge during the restructuring. We traced none because he used public terminals and paper mail. One envelope warned that the Western warehouse contained duplicate serial plates. Another included a photograph of North Key trucks. Freya's team found him through an old professional license renewal under a protected address. Orrin was alive, living 2 provinces away, and had spent 18 years expecting Cresswell security to knock on his door. He agreed to speak only after learning Walter's conviction could be overturned. His interview added the missing structure. Orrin dispatched vehicles on the night Margot died. Conrad's security chief ordered an unmarked company SUV and tow truck to the mountain route. The SUV returned with damage matching the paint left on Margot's bumper. Before sunrise, the tow truck transported it to a private workshop controlled by North Key. Orrin copied the dispatch sheet because the order lacked a job number. When he questioned it, a supervisor threatened his family. He fled with the original carbon copy and a photograph of the damaged SUV. The driver remained unidentified, but the order chain now connected Conrad's security operation, North Key, and the crash. Prosecutors obtained search warrants for archived insurer files and Cresswell storage facilities. The restructuring officer cooperated. We did not announce the homicide investigation. Bianca continued attacking me without understanding what her own records were revealing. She sued for breach of promise, demanding compensation for canceled wedding expenses and reputational damage. Naomi responded with receipts showing I paid most vendors and released all non-refundable deposits. The jurisdiction had no enforceable cause of action forcing someone to marry or pay for refusing. Bianca also invoked the prenuptial agreement. That document was effective only upon legal marriage. We never married. It protected neither person and transferred nothing. But Cyrus signed it, Bianca told reporters outside court. Naomi answered inside the courtroom, where definitions mattered. The judge dismissed the marriage-related claims and directed the parties to resolve ordinary vendor expenses through contract procedures. Bianca kept every personal asset lawfully titled in her name: her trust department, jewelry purchased with legitimate distributions, and savings unrelated to disputed transfers. The court froze only $41 million traceable to Cresswell funds routed through Trent's consultants, plus property purchased from those accounts. That distinction enraged her more than total confiscation might have. She could not claim I had taken everything. Documents identified exactly what she kept and why the rest was restrained. Trent began moving away from her. His messages became shorter. He missed renewal committee meetings. When Bianca asked Malcolm to fund her legal defense, Malcolm requested her voting proxy first. She signed. Her attorney warned that the proxy allowed Holloway Capital to vote her 9% in any restructuring matter for 5 years. Bianca believed loyalty required sacrifice during crisis. The irony did not reach her. Malcolm combined her proxy with debt leverage and proposed a restructuring plan that would transfer Cresswell's remaining intellectual property to his fund. In return, he promised to release Bianca from certain personal guarantees. The independent administrator rejected the plan because it undervalued assets and favored an insider creditor. Malcolm appealed. While lawyers fought, someone broke into a Cresswell Records warehouse. The intruders ignored equipment and went directly to archived fleet boxes from the year Margot died. A motion sensor alerted the administrator's security team. Police arrested one man inside and another in a van. Both worked for a private firm used by Holloway Capital. The van contained shredding equipment, fuel cans, and a list of search terms: Margot Renwick, North Key, Orrin Beck, Mountain Route. Malcolm called them rogue contractors. Trent had texted the warehouse address to their supervisor. The homicide investigation became impossible to conceal after court filings referenced the attempted destruction. News outlets connected Margot's death, Walter's conviction, and the Cresswell collapse. My father's public image changed overnight from convicted smuggler to possible framed employee. People who insulted him online began calling him heroic. Walter disliked both labels. "I was frightened," he said during a recorded statement approved by Freya. "I signed false records under pressure, and then accepted guilt because I believed obedience would protect my son. It did not. Fear explains my decision. It does not make the records true." He asked the public to wait for the court. That restraint restored more dignity than any dramatic revenge speech. Bianca requested a private meeting with me. Naomi arranged it in a mediation office with both attorneys present. Bianca arrived alone. Trent had gone abroad for what he called a financing conference. She looked smaller without family staff orbiting her, but she still wore the diamond bracelet Trent bought using money from her consulting transfers. "Did my father kill your mother?" she asked. "The prosecutor is investigating. You believe he did. I believe evidence should decide. You knew this before proposing to me. I knew there were unexplained payments and a corrupted accident file. I did not have Margot's report, the cassette, or Orrin's dispatch copy." Her eyes hardened. "So the engagement was surveillance. The engagement began because Conrad wanted to bind company leadership to your family, and because I still confused history with affection. Naomi's independent review later revealed accounts. I did not enter your bedroom, phone, or private messages. The audit obtained communications under legal preservation after suspicious transfers appeared. You never loved me. I did. That is not a defense for either of us." She looked away. "Trent says the homicide story is fabricated to destroy Malcolm's bid. Trent's contractors carried a list containing my mother's name into a records warehouse. He said they were protecting evidence from your people. Then why bring fuel?" For several seconds, Bianca had no answer. "Help the prosecutor," I said. "Give them every message, device, and account involving Trent and Malcolm. Cooperation does not erase what you signed, but it may prevent more destruction. You want me to betray the only person who stayed with me." He left the country. "For work." Her attorney shifted uncomfortably. I ended the meeting. Outside, Sabine waited with a new report. Holloway Capital had begun a tender offer for Meridian Forge shares through affiliated funds. Malcolm intended to capture my company after failing to take Cresswell's assets cheaply. The offer valued Meridian Forge above market, but required investors to tender before full audit disclosures. Financial media called it a decisive counterattack. This was not an enemy materializing in the final chapter. We had modeled it months earlier. Meridian Forge's board convened that evening. I owned 28%. Employees and founders held 24% through voting trusts. Long-term institutions held most of the rest. Malcolm could not seize control by shouting on a screen, but a generous offer could persuade enough investors. We had 3 lawful defenses. First, disclose material risks and audited value so shareholders could decide with accurate information. Second, activate a shareholder rights plan approved the previous year, diluting any bidder who crossed 15% without board review. Third, offer no false promises. If Malcolm's price genuinely exceeded independent value and protected employees, the board had to consider it. Can we prove the affiliated funds act together? Sabine asked. Their filings deny coordination, Naomi said. Trading patterns suggest it, but suggestion is not enough. We needed evidence before the tender deadline. Malcolm had selected the battlefield where he felt strongest, money moving faster than courts. He forgot that money leaves records faster too. Sabine created a transaction map covering every Meridian Forge purchase during the first 48 hours of the tender. 7 funds claimed to be independent. All used different names, jurisdictions, and brokers. They also settled through the same private bank in Belmere, borrowed from matching credit lines, and placed orders within seconds of one another. That pattern supported suspicion, not legal aggregation. Naomi sought expedited discovery before the commercial court. Holloway's attorneys argued that forcing beneficial ownership disclosure would destroy the tender's confidentiality. The judge ordered limited production because control of a regulated manufacturer involved national supply contracts. Malcolm appealed again. Meanwhile, he flooded the market with promises. Holloway Capital would keep every job, invest $300 million in new plants, and make Meridian Forge a global champion. His presentation omitted that 3 prior acquisitions by his fund ended with facilities closed and patents transferred overseas. We published the history with source documents. He called it xenophobic fear-mongering. Employees held their own meeting. Their voting trust controlled 14% of Meridian Forge. I did not direct it. A committee elected by workers hired independent advisors to assess the offer. Bianca appeared outside the meeting with cameras. Cyrus pretends employees own the company, she told reporters. In reality, he controls them through loyalty. A furnace supervisor named Derek Yates stepped to the microphone. Mr. Renwick cannot instruct our trust, he said. Ms. Cresswell signed the closure notice for my old plant without visiting it. We remember who treated payroll as people and who treated it as a line to cut. The committee recommended rejecting Malcolm's offer unless he signed enforceable job and domestic production commitments. Malcolm refused. The trust did not tender. Long-term institutions waited for the court disclosures. The share price rose above Holloway's offer, making the bid less attractive. Malcolm increased the price and shortened the deadline. Pressure moved to Bianca. Her 9% Cresswell proxy no longer affected Meridian Forge directly, but Malcolm needed her cooperation in the criminal investigation. Trent called from overseas and instructed her to destroy their private chat history because Cyrus's people would twist intimacy into finance. For once, Bianca asked a useful question. Why are you afraid of messages if they were jokes? Trent told her she sounded ungrateful. Then he stopped answering. Bianca went to the apartment where he had been staying. The lease had ended. His clothes were gone. Building records showed he left for the airport 6 hours after the warehouse arrests. She called Malcolm. Your son abandoned the renewal committee. Trent is protecting family interests abroad. He has my voting proxy, which you signed after independent advice. Revoke it. The proxy is irrevocable for 5 years under the financing covenant. Only then did Bianca understand that she had repeated the same mistake she accused Walter of making. She called surrender loyalty because the person demanding it said they were saving her. Malcolm ended the call. Her attorney advised immediate cooperation with Freya Dalton. Bianca refused for one more night. She spent it reading every message from Trent. Their affair began 2 years earlier at a charity regatta. Trent praised her frustration with being treated as Conrad's decorative heir. He said Cyrus kept her weak by handling every serious decision. He offered secret excitement, then gradually turned intimacy into signatures. The first consulting transfer followed their third meeting. The first false loan application followed a weekend abroad. The night in the bridal suite had not been spontaneous. Trent suggested it after learning separation protocol notices might begin once the marriage failed. He believed provoking me into an emotional public reaction would discredit me before the board. Bianca still chose him. Manipulation did not transform her into an innocent victim. It revealed that Trent's cruelty had used her arrogance rather than creating it. At 6 the next morning, she entered Freya's office with 2 phones, a tablet, and passwords written by her attorney. She requested a cooperation agreement. The prosecutor promised only that truthful assistance would be reported to the court. No immunity, no guarantee against charges for false statements or misappropriation. Bianca accepted. Her devices contained a hidden voice message archive. Trent had accidentally synchronized messages from Malcolm onto their shared tablet. One described the affiliated tender funds as 7 fingers on one hand. Another instructed Trent to keep each entity below disclosure thresholds until the final day. That was the coordination evidence we needed. Freya shared the material with the securities regulator under court authorization. Naomi received it through expedited discovery hours later. The regulator ordered corrected beneficial ownership filings. Once aggregated, Holloway-controlled entities held 17.4% of Meridian Forge. The shareholder rights plan activated automatically at 15. Other shareholders received discounted rights. Holloway did not. His percentage diluted, and the tender required new financing to continue. Malcolm sued the board, accusing us of entrenchment. At the emergency hearing, independent directors showed that the plan predated his bid, applied to any unapproved acquirer, and included a procedure for evaluating superior offers. The board had invited Holloway to negotiate job protections and access for due diligence. He refused both. The court declined to block the plan. 2 Belmere lenders withdrew their tender financing after discovering Malcolm misrepresented coordinated holdings. Without leverage, the offer expired. Meridian Forge remained independent. There was no single triumphant button press. The defense succeeded because workers controlled real votes. Directors had approved protections before the crisis. Lenders received accurate risk information, and Bianca finally preserved evidence instead of deleting it. Malcolm lost money. More importantly, he lost speed. Freya's team used the delay to follow North Quay accounts. The Shell importer had continued operating through affiliates controlled by Holloway Capital. Recent transfers paid the warehouse intruders and Trent's flights. An international financial intelligence request froze the specific accounts connected to suspected crime. Regulators did not seize Malcolm's entire empire because a press conference accused him. They restrained identified funds after courts reviewed traced transactions. Malcolm remained abroad and denied wrongdoing. Trent returned only because his passport was flagged during a transfer through a cooperating jurisdiction. Officers arrested him at the airport on charges related to evidence destruction, fraud, and unauthorized disclosure of corporate information. He requested bail and claimed Bianca directed everything. Prosecutors played his messages. Bail was granted under strict conditions rather than denied for dramatic effect. His passport remained surrendered. He wore an electronic monitor and could not contact witnesses. Bianca watched the hearing from a separate room. Trent did not look at her. Afterward, she sent me one message through Naomi. I understand that I helped him reach the company. I will answer for what I signed. I am not asking you to forgive me. I did not reply. Cooperation was necessary. It was not reconciliation. The Cresswell administration concluded 6 months after the canceled wedding. Meridian Forge took over the compliant plants, 580 employees, and the environmental cleanup obligations. Another manufacturer purchased the consumer division. A logistics firm acquired the warehouses under regulator supervision. The remaining shell collapsed into liquidation. Creditors recovered 68 cents on the dollar, far more than Malcolm's forced sale proposal offered. Employees received protected wage claims. Communities received funded remediation rather than abandoned chemical sites. Conrad's family trust lost most of its corporate value but retained enough for his medical care. Imogen ensured no creditor touched funds legally dedicated to treatment. I visited him once, with Walter's permission. Conrad sat in the residence garden watching birds. He called me by my father's name. "Walter," he said, "did Margot send the customs file?" The question stopped me. "Which file?" He frowned, searching a damaged memory. "Malcolm said the road would solve it. You should have signed. Everyone should have signed." A nurse recorded the statement in his chart. I did not interrogate him. A medically impaired man's confused words were not reliable evidence. But the phrase, "the road would solve it," matched language on the microcassette. Freya obtained judicial permission for a clinical forensic interview conducted by a specialist. Conrad gave inconsistent answers. Some implicated Malcolm. Others confused people and years. Prosecutors correctly refused to treat the interview as a confession. Instead, they used it to identify a phrase worth searching in archived communications. An old backup server seized from Cresswell storage contained deleted pager messages from the month Margot died. Most were numerical codes. One text from Conrad's security chief to a North Key number read, "The road solves the report. M approved. C wants no police delay." M could mean Malcolm. C could mean Conrad. Defense counsel could argue many alternatives. Oren recognized the receiving pager number as belonging to the SUV driver, a security contractor named Pavel Dorn. Pavel had left the country after the crash and died 10 years later. His estate records showed a safe deposit box closed by his widow. Freya's international request located the contents transferred to archival storage. Cash records, a North Key identity card, and a handwritten mileage log. The log placed the SUV on Margot's route at the exact time of the crash. A notation beside the mileage read, M/H, authorized, Cresswell cleanup. Again, one note was not enough. The money record connected it to a Holloway account. The dispatch sheet connected the vehicle. Paint analysis connected the damaged SUV photograph. The towing payment connected the cleanup. The pager message connected the order. Margot's recording established motive. Separate pieces became a chain. Freya requested indictments against Malcolm for conspiracy and against Conrad for his role, subject to a competency process because of his illness. Walter's original conviction review proceeded separately. The court vacated Walter's conviction after prosecutors acknowledged material evidence had been withheld and records were altered after his arrest. The order did not call him a hero. It called the conviction unsafe. Walter held the document for a long time. 23 years, he said. I know. No order returns them. No. He folded the page carefully. Then I will not spend the years left pretending I still owe Conrad. He moved from transition housing into a small apartment near a community workshop. He began repairing furniture, something he had learned in prison. The first chair he restored leaned slightly, but he refused to apologize for it. It holds weight, he said. So did he. Our relationship did not become instantly warm. He still asked permission before opening my refrigerator. He still thanked Sabine every time she sent a car for a court date. Some mornings, he woke believing officers would return. We attended family counseling twice a month. He learned to ask what I wanted instead of what would please a benefactor. I learned not to punish the frightened man in front of me for every choice made by the father in my memories. Progress was quiet. The public wanted louder revenge. Reporters asked why Bianca still lived in her trust apartment. Comment sections demanded she lose every dress, every jewel, and every meal because she cheated. The law was not a wish for humiliation. Bianca sold the apartment voluntarily to fund legal defense and restitution after forensic accountants proved part of its renovation came from diverted company money. She moved into a modest rental and found work through a court-approved financial literacy program. Not because poverty itself was justice, but because she needed income independent of family funds. She pleaded guilty to falsifying loan certifications and misappropriating corporate money. Her cooperation reduced the sentence. The court imposed a period of custody, restitution, and a long ban from serving as a company director. The affair was not a crime. The signatures were. Trent pleaded not guilty and blamed everyone else. His trial was scheduled after the financial case against Malcolm. As for Conrad, doctors found him unable to participate meaningfully in a criminal trial. Proceedings were stayed, not erased. His assets remained subject to civil claims, and an independent guardian protected both his care and victims' rights. That outcome frustrated people who wanted a villain to deliver a final speech before punishment. Reality did not owe us theatrical competence from a sick man. I had one enemy left who understood exactly what he had done: Malcolm Holloway. Malcolm remained in Belmere, a financial jurisdiction with a slow extradition process and strict corporate secrecy laws. He controlled funds worth billions and believed distance converted evidence into inconvenience. His first counterattack came through arbitration. Holloway Capital claimed Meridian Forge's purchase of Cresswell assets violated an old foreign investment agreement. According to Malcolm, the administrator had discriminated against his bid and transferred valuable patents to my company below market value. The claim demanded $800 million. Naomi read it twice. "He is not expecting the win quickly," she said. "He wants lenders to treat the potential liability as real until we spend years defeating it." Meridian Forge's credit line was due for annual review in 2 months. A huge, unresolved claim could raise our borrowing costs and slow the integration of former Cresswell plants. Sabine assembled the auction record: independent valuations, competing bids, creditor votes, environmental liabilities, and court approval. Our purchase price was lower than the face value of the assets because we assumed cleanup expenses worth $90 million. Holloway's proposal excluded those costs and offered unsecured notes instead of cash. The transaction had not favored me. It had measured what each bidder actually promised. Malcolm's second attack targeted supply. 3 vendors notified Meridian Forge that they could no longer provide a rare catalyst needed for aerospace coatings. Holloway affiliates owned minority positions in all 3. The contracts included termination fees, but money would not fill production tanks. Previous Cresswell executives had allowed a single-source dependency because Malcolm offered temporary discounts. I had flagged it years earlier. Conrad rejected diversification as wasteful. Meridian Forge inherited the weakness. We had 6 weeks of inventory. Sabine proposed purchasing emergency stock at triple price. "That keeps current orders alive," she said. "It does not solve the dependency." Our research director, Dr. Paul Sarin, had spent 2 years testing a recycled substitute using recovered industrial material. It was not fully certified for aerospace use, but it met specifications for consumer and construction coatings. We shifted non-critical production to the substitute, preserving rare catalyst for regulated orders. Customers approved revised schedules. The employee trust accepted temporary overtime limits instead of forced expansion. The shortage hurt margins. It did not close the plants. Malcolm's third attack used confidence. Anonymous reports claimed Meridian Forge falsified quality tests at the newly acquired facility. A spreadsheet appeared online showing batch failures and deleted inspections. Our share price fell 12% before noon. The spreadsheet looked convincing because most of its data was real. One column was not. Our quality director, Dr. Etta Lane, compared the leak with laboratory records. Somebody had shifted decimal points in contaminant readings and removed the electronic signatures showing retests passed. The altered file came from a contractor account created during Cresswell administration. Access logs placed the login at an office used by Holloway's restructuring advisors. We published the original data, third-party laboratory confirmations, and access history. Then we invited regulators to inspect the facility. The share price recovered slowly. Confidence should recover slowly. Anything faster is advertising. The planted spreadsheet became evidence in both arbitration and the securities investigation. Malcolm called me after the regulator announced its review. Naomi and Freya listened with my consent. The line recorded automatically after a legal notice. "You are exhausting yourself, Cyrus," he said. His voice carried the relaxed contempt of someone who had always paid others to feel urgency. "Every defense creates another cost. Then stop creating attacks. I am creating price discovery. Meridian Forge is valuable because you are competent. Competent men should know when to sell. Submit a lawful offer with accurate ownership disclosures and enforceable employee protections. The board will evaluate it." He laughed. "You still believe rules are walls. Rules are curtains. Money decides who looks behind them. Is that what you told Conrad?" Silence lasted half a second. "Conrad was useful until guilt made him sentimental," Malcolm said. "Margot made him weak. Walter made weakness contagious. Naomi wrote a note. Keep him talking. Do not lead. What did Margot do? I asked. She confused a safety report with power. And the road solved it? The line went quiet. Then Malcolm chuckled. You found an old man's broken memory and built a fairy tale. Courts require more. They do. Drop the homicide allegation and support dismissal of Trent's charges. I withdraw arbitration, release the suppliers, and settle Walter's restitution claim for $10 million. Your father can spend his remaining years believing his cowardice purchased something. Walter sat in the next room by choice. He had asked to hear any settlement concerning his name. I looked through the glass. He shook his head. No, I said. Ask him before answering. Walter opened the connecting door and spoke into the conference microphone. He did. Malcolm stopped breathing for a moment. Walter's hands shook, but his voice did not. I spent half my life taking orders because I was afraid of what you and Conrad would do to my son. You already took the years. You cannot buy the truth with the money you made from them. Walter, Malcolm said almost warmly. Still practicing loyalty for whoever feeds you? My father looked at me. No, he replied. Learning choice. He left the room. Malcolm's warmth vanished. You will regret using him for theater. The call is recorded. Direct further communication to counsel. I ended it. The conversation did not contain a clean confession. Malcolm acknowledged knowing Margot's report, repeated the phrase from Conrad's memory, and offered financial benefits tied to dropping a homicide allegation. Prosecutors treated it as corroboration, not the center of the case. The greatest breakthrough came from inside Holloway Capital. Tobias Lorne, the fund's former treasury director, contacted Freya through counsel. He had managed Belmere credit lines for the affiliated tender funds. After Malcolm blamed junior staff for disclosure failures, Tobias preserved instructions proving coordinated trades, evidence destruction payments, and North Key ownership. He also possessed a scanned ledger from the year Margot died. Holloway Capital digitized old archives during a merger. Tobias noticed an entry labeled Road Remediation, charged to North Key. Supporting documents showed payments to Pavel Dorn, the corrupt investigating officer, and Conrad's security chief. The approval code belonged to Malcolm. Tobias had no knowledge of murder when the records were scanned. He copied them later after seeing Margot's name in news coverage and realizing the code matched Malcolm's personal authorization register. Freya verified the files against bank archives. Hash records showed they predated the current dispute. Independent technicians confirmed no later alteration. The operational chain was complete enough for prosecutors to act. Belmere authorities received an extradition request supported by evidence rather than political pressure. They froze specific North Key assets and restricted Malcolm's travel while a court reviewed the case. He continued fighting from his office. The arbitration hearing began before extradition was decided. Malcolm's attorneys presented Meridian Forge as a revenge vehicle built to strip Cresswell assets. Our defense did not ask arbitrators to admire me. It walked through transaction dates. Meridian Forge existed 5 years before Conrad's stroke. Independent investors funded it. Cresswell paid market rates under contracts approved by disinterested directors. The asset auction occurred under court supervision. Holloway's bid excluded environmental costs and depended on financing from secretly coordinated funds. Tobias testified about those funds. Bianca testified about the voting proxy and Trent's instructions. Sabine testified about valuation. Workers testified about job commitments. Malcolm's claim weakened until his own attorneys sought settlement. We agreed to dismissal with each side paying its costs only after Holloway Capital waived all claims to the auction assets and corrected public disclosures. I did not demand a theatrical apology. Legal certainty protected the company better. With arbitration gone, lenders renewed Meridian Forge's facilities at normal rates. The supply boycott also collapsed. 2 vendors replaced boards after minority investors objected to serving Malcolm's personal dispute. The third paid termination penalties. Dr. Etta Lane's substitute catalyst received certification for additional product classes, reducing future dependence. An attack had accelerated the solution to a weakness Conrad refused to address. At Meridian Forge's annual meeting, Sabine presented results without hiding the cost. Revenue grew, but margins fell because of integration and cleanup. Workplace injuries declined 30%. Former Cresswell plants retained 94% of employees. Environmental reserves were fully funded. One shareholder asked why we did not use the crisis to buy competitors cheaply. Because surviving predatory capital does not require becoming predatory capital, I answered. Another asked whether my personal revenge distorted strategy. It would if directors stopped questioning me. That is why independent oversight remains stronger now than before the attack. The board renewed my appointment as chief executive for 3 years. Not life. Power, with an expiration date, felt healthier. After the meeting, Sabine handed me a sealed court notice. Belmere had approved Malcolm's extradition, subject to one final appeal. He tried to leave the jurisdiction using a diplomatic charter flight before the travel restriction entered the airport system. Border officials stopped him at a private terminal. No camera captured police pounding on his office door during a villainous video call. The first public image showed Malcolm walking beside his attorneys into a Belmere courthouse, fully dressed, furious, and unable to purchase a different exit. His final appeal failed 2 months later. He returned in custody to face conspiracy, financial crime, witness intimidation, and evidence destruction charges. The homicide count proceeded under a separate indictment requiring proof of intent and participation. Trent changed his plea after Malcolm's extradition. He admitted arranging access to Bianca, using her signatures to move funds, coordinating the warehouse intrusion, and delivering internal Meridian Forge information to affiliated tender funds. In exchange for a reduced recommendation, he agreed to testify about Malcolm's commands. Bianca attended the plea hearing. When Trent described the bridal suite encounter as an influence operation, she closed her eyes. That phrase was another manipulation. He wanted the court to believe strategy created every touch, minimizing his personal betrayal. Their messages showed genuine desire alongside financial purpose. People can exploit and desire someone at the same time. Bianca had to live with both truths. She asked Naomi to forward a letter to me. Naomi read it first at my request. The letter apologized for the affair, the childhood humiliation, the forged certifications, and the belief that my work belonged to her family. It did not ask for a meeting. I kept it in the legal archive. I did not answer. Forgiveness was not another service I owed the Cresswells. Malcolm's trial began 19 months after the wedding that never happened. By then, the public had consumed so many summaries that most people believed they knew the case. Some thought it was about a cheated fiancé destroying a rich family. Others thought it was a heroic employee overthrowing criminal owners. Both versions reduced decades of choices into a satisfying headline. The courtroom required details. Freya's prosecution team divided the case into 3 timelines. The first covered North Key's smuggling and false customs operation. Bank records showed Malcolm and Conrad financing restricted imports. Margot's safety report documented the physical danger. Walter's conviction files proved records were altered to place responsibility on him. The second timeline covered Margot's death. Oren's dispatch copy placed the SUV and tow truck on the mountain route. Paint evidence connected the SUV photograph to her damaged car. Pavel Dorn's mileage log placed him there. The pager message and road remediation ledger tied the operation to Conrad's security chief and Malcolm's authorization code. The third timeline covered the modern cover-up. Payments to warehouse intruders, Trent's instructions, attempts to destroy fleet archives, and Malcolm's offer to pay Walter if we withdrew the allegation. No witness carried the entire story. That made the case stronger, not weaker. Oren testified first about dispatch procedures. Defense counsel attacked his long silence. "You waited 18 years before accusing a successful businessman," the attorney said. "Only after Mr. Renwick's son became powerful did you remember details favorable to him." Oren did not pretend courage. "I remembered every day," he replied. "I was afraid every day, too. The dispatch sheet did not become newer because I became less afraid." Forensic examination confirmed the carbon copy's age and ink. Payroll records proved Oren held the dispatcher role. His fear explained delay. Documents supported memory. Tobias testified about Malcolm's authorization register. Defense counsel called him a disgruntled employee seeking immunity. He acknowledged negotiating a cooperation agreement and described exactly what prosecutors promised. Then, independent bank records matched his archive copies. Trent testified for 2 days. He described Malcolm teaching him to approach heirs whose families controlled distressed assets. Romance created access that formal investors could not obtain. Trent had used similar tactics twice before, though never inside a bridal suite. When Freya asked why he chose that location, he looked toward Bianca. She wanted to prove Cyrus could not stop her, he said. My father wanted Cyrus angry enough to abandon governance rules. We both believed he would make a public scene. Who proposed the encounter? I suggested the timing. Bianca chose to proceed. The answer assigned responsibility accurately. Bianca testified under a cooperation order. She wore a plain dark suit and answered without the contempt she once used as armor. She admitted approving payments without verifying services, sharing internal information with Trent, signing false collateral statements, and giving Holloway an irrevocable proxy. She also admitted the affair began before any financial scheme she understood. Malcolm's attorney tried to turn her into a rejected woman seeking revenge against the lover who left. You want the jury to punish the Holloways because Trent humiliated you, he said. I am already being punished for what I signed, Bianca replied. The messages exist whether I am humiliated or proud. For the first time in her life, she did not require dignity before telling the truth. Walter's testimony concerned coercion and the safe deposit key. The defense displayed his old guilty plea on a large screen. You swore under oath that you falsified customs records, the attorney said. Yes. Now you swear the opposite? Yes. Which oath should the jury believe? Walter looked at the document. The one supported by the server timestamps, Margot's report, and the attorney notes showing why I lied. Do not believe me alone. His answer removed the trap. The defense wanted a morality play about unreliable people. Walter returned the case to evidence. I testified last for the prosecution. Malcolm's attorneys spent hours describing my motive for revenge. They showed childhood emails, the canceled wedding notice, the asset auction, and the growth of Meridian Forge. You benefited from Cresswell Meridian's collapse, counsel said. Meridian Forge purchased assets in a competitive court process. I also lost personal guarantees, paid integration costs, and assumed cleanup obligations. The transaction records show each amount. You hated Conrad Cresswell. Yes. You hate Malcolm Holloway. Yes. The attorney paused, surprised I had not denied it. And you expect this jury to trust evidence gathered by a man consumed with hatred? No. I expect them to examine evidence gathered by auditors, banks, police, laboratories, witnesses, and courts. My feelings do not change a pager timestamp. Freya asked no dramatic final question. The documents had already spoken. Malcolm did not testify. That was his right and not evidence of guilt. The jury deliberated for 4 days. They convicted him of conspiracy to murder, financial fraud, witness intimidation, and evidence destruction. They acquitted him on 2 counts involving transactions prosecutors could not trace beyond a reasonable doubt. The mixed verdict mattered. It showed the jury had evaluated each allegation rather than accepting a total villain story. At sentencing, Margot's name appeared in the formal record as a victim, not a reckless driver. Malcolm received a long prison term. Financial penalties funded victim restitution and environmental cleanup. His legitimate investors retained rights to uninvolved funds. Holloway Capital entered independent administration rather than vanishing in a cinematic explosion. Trent received a reduced sentence based on cooperation, but it still included custody, restitution, and a permanent restriction from regulated finance. He had provided evidence after arrest, not before harm. Bianca's separate sentence followed her plea. The judge credited substantial assistance and genuine restitution efforts. She served less time than Trent and entered supervised release with employment and financial restrictions. Some viewers would have wanted all 3 buried beneath identical punishment. Justice measured different acts. Conrad remained medically incompetent. A civil court reviewed evidence against his estate and found him liable for wrongful death, fraud, and coercion under the applicable standard. His non-medical trust assets went toward Walter, Margot's estate, former workers, and cleanup claims. His treatment fund remained protected until death. He never understood the judgment. That denied me the fantasy of watching recognition destroy him. I learned to live without the fantasy. On the day the wrongful conviction court issued Walter's final certificate of innocence, we visited Margot's grave. He brought the restored chair from his workshop because the cemetery bench had broken. We sat beside the stone while wind moved through dry grass. "She told me not to confess," Walter said. "You were threatened. I still chose." "Yes." He looked at me. "You never softened that answer." "Would you believe me if I did?" After a moment, he shook his head. "No." He placed the innocence certificate beneath a temporary cover near the grave, not as an offering to the dead, but because he needed Margot's name beside it for one afternoon. "I spent prison imagining Conrad raising you better than I could," he said. "That lie made the cell easier. I spent his house imagining obedience would bring you home sooner." "Did you hate me?" "Sometimes." He accepted it. "Do you now?" I thought about the man who once asked Bianca's permission to exist, and the man who refused Malcolm's money over a recorded line. Not today. It was not the embrace audiences might expect after a courtroom victory. It was more honest. Walter nodded and looked across the cemetery. "Not today is good." We left the restored chair there for other visitors. Meridian Forge's board refused my proposal to name the company after Margot. Sabine led the opposition. "Your mother fought to make institutions accountable," she said. "Turning a public manufacturer into a family memorial contradicts the lesson." I was angry for an evening. Then I admitted she was right. We created the Margot Renwick Fair Enterprise Trust instead, legally independent from Meridian Forge. The company committed a fixed percentage of annual profit for 10 years, but independent trustees controlled grants. The trust had 3 programs. The first provided legal representation to employees pressured into signing false records or accepting blame for executives. The second financed safety technology and environmental remediation at small manufacturers that could not afford upgrades. The third offered patient loans to innovative suppliers vulnerable to predatory acquisitions. Oren joined the safety advisory panel. Walter taught furniture repair at a rehabilitation workshop funded through a separate community grant. He refused a ceremonial title. "I spent too long wearing names other people gave me," he said. "Volunteer is enough." Sabine became one of the trust's founding trustees, but not chair. A former labor judge held that role. Employee, community, and technical representatives occupied equal seats. No single benefactor could convert the foundation into personal advertising. At Meridian Forge, integration took 3 years. We removed managers involved in falsification, but retained people who reported problems or lacked decision authority. Every plant received an independent safety committee with stop-work power. Supplier contracts disclosed beneficial ownership. Executive bonuses depended partly on injury reduction, emissions, and verified customer quality. Profit fell in the first year. It recovered in the second because fewer failures, recalls, and emergency loans cost less than hiding them. By the third year, Meridian Forge exceeded the legitimate peak of Cresswell Meridian without restoring its gray operations. Business magazines called it my empire. I corrected them in every interview. An empire obeys a person. A company should survive one. The board still evaluated me annually. Employees still voted their trust. Sabine still rejected my bad ideas in complete sentences, especially my bad ideas. One evening, after a long budget meeting, I found her alone in the cafeteria eating soup from a paper cup. "You voted against me 4 times today," I said. 5. You forgot the travel policy amendment. That was a clarification. It was an attempt to purchase a helicopter. For remote plant inspections. We have trains. I sat across from her with my own cup. For years, Sabine had been the person who asked whether my plan remained legal when revenge made shortcuts tempting. She never demanded gratitude for it. She was not waiting to become the reward after Bianca. "Would you have dinner with me somewhere that does not sell soup in paper?" I asked. She studied my face. "As CFO? No." "Then disclose the personal relationship to the board before a second dinner and remove yourself from my compensation decisions." "This is not yet a first dinner. I plan ahead." I smiled. "Is that a yes?" "It is a conditional approval." Our first date took place at a small restaurant with no photographers. We discussed books, terrible office art, and everything except Cresswell debt. Nothing dramatic happened. That was why I wanted a second. The second date almost did not occur. Financial reporters noticed Sabine and me leaving the restaurant separately. By morning, a headline claimed the calculating CFO had helped me dismantle my fiancé's family to become the next woman beside the chairman. Bianca's affair had been photographed. Sabine's dinner became a conspiracy through suggestion alone. We disclosed the date to Meridian Forge's governance committee before breakfast. I withdrew from Sabine's pay, promotion, and equity decisions. An independent director reviewed whether our relationship had affected previous transactions. The review found none. Sabine still postponed our second date. "I will not continue while employees wonder whether disagreeing with you threatens my career," she said. The committee confirmed independence. A committee confirms procedure. Culture requires time. She was right again, which became an irritating theme. We spent 3 months attending the same meetings without private dinners. She challenged my budgets as aggressively as before. Employees watched, then stopped watching when nothing changed. The second date happened after the annual compensation review run entirely without me. We went bowling. Sabine beat me by 40 points and refused to classify it as a material corporate event. Our relationship remained quiet. We maintained separate homes and separate professional authority. She did not heal the damage Bianca caused. She met me after I had already begun healing and expected me to continue the work myself. The next serious test came from the ground beneath East Bank plant. Meridian Forge acquired East Bank during the Cresswell auction because it employed 200 people and produced our most advanced heat-resistant coating. Environmental reports identified moderate soil contamination around an old storage yard. We accepted responsibility and funded remediation. 16 months later, a community well tested positive for a restricted solvent far beyond the modeled boundary. Dr. Etta Lane ordered immediate independent sampling. Results showed a plume extending beneath 37 homes and a primary school. The contamination dated back at least 15 years. Our asset agreement contained a liability cap. Legally, the old Cresswell estate and government cleanup fund bore costs above that amount. Both lacked enough money. Meridian Forge could close the plant, pay the capped sum, and leave public agencies to handle the rest. Several investors recommended exactly that. Estimated full remediation exceeded $140 million. Paying it could eliminate dividends for 2 years and delay every expansion project. At the emergency board meeting, I proposed voluntary funding beyond our contractual limit. Sabine opposed the proposal as written. "We cannot spend shareholder assets because Cyrus feels inherited guilt," she said in front of everyone. "We need a plan connecting responsibility, community health, employee continuity, and company survival." The statement hurt because inherited guilt was part of my motive. I recused myself from leading the committee. Sabine worked with residents, regulators, insurers, lenders, and independent directors. A community representative named Marta Ellison demanded drinking water replacement before any negotiation about blame. We installed temporary filtration and delivered bottled water within 24 hours. Medical testing began through a provider chosen by residents, not our lawyers. Then the committee designed a shared plan. Meridian Forge would fund $60 million beyond its legal cap, preserve East Bank jobs during phased closure, and convert the plant to a dry process technology that eliminated the solvent. The government fund and Cresswell estate would contribute available amounts. Insurers would enter mediation. Future tax credits would offset part of conversion costs, but only after verified cleanup milestones. Residents received an independent monitoring trust with access to real-time groundwater data. The board approved the plan after public review. Our share price fell 9%. Analysts called it an emotional overpayment. Marta called it the first meeting where a company arrived with water before legal defenses. During excavation, workers discovered buried drums stamped with North Key markings. The finding extended Malcolm and Conrad's environmental liability, but did not change our immediate duty to people drinking from the ground. We disclosed the drums the same day. No manager waited for a stock exchange holiday. No publicist searched for a softer phrase than contamination. That choice cost money and prevented panic from becoming distrust. Dr. Lynn Serrano, a chemist at a small startup called Renewal Matrix, offered a method for recovering the solvent and converting waste into a catalyst precursor. Her company lacked capital to scale. The Margot Trust received her loan application. Because Meridian Forge could benefit, I disclosed the conflict and took no part in the grant review. Independent trustees approved a pilot after technical assessment. The trust published its reasoning and loan terms. The pilot worked. Within 18 months, Renewal Matrix reduced disposal volume by 70% and supplied part of the alternative catalyst Dr. Lane had developed during Malcolm's boycott. The startup hired former Cresswell workers and retained its independence. Malcolm's model would have purchased the patents and closed the local lab. Our model earned no ownership stake from the trust loan. It earned repayment and a stronger supplier. The difference appeared boring in financial tables. It changed who controlled the future. East Bank cleanup took 5 years. Meridian Forge's profits recovered before the groundwater did. We continued funding both. At a public review meeting, one resident asked whether the program existed only because my mother had died fighting Cresswell pollution. Her death made it impossible for me to ignore the pattern, I said. But a company should not require a personal tragedy before responding. That is why monitoring and stop work authority belong to systems, not my mood. Marta later joined the Margot Trust board. She disagreed with me more often than Sabine, which I had not believed possible. Walter volunteered at East Bank's worker workshop once a week. He taught people to repair household furniture while production lines were closed. The program began as a way to fill time and developed into a cooperative making school desks from reclaimed wood. The first large order came from the primary school affected by contamination. Walter insisted on inspecting every desk. Children lean back on chairs, he said. Adults design as if they do not. His slightly crooked first chair still sat in his apartment. He refused to sell it. One evening, I helped him carry finished desks into a truck. He handed me a sanding block without asking whether a chief executive knew how to use it. I did not. He taught me. We worked for an hour before he spoke about prison. Conrad visited every year, he said. He brought photographs of you. He always chose ones where you stood behind Bianca. I thought you asked me to stand there. I did. He said if you became indispensable, nobody would remember whose son you were. I remembered. Walter set down the sandpaper. I was ashamed of you seeing me in prison, so I told myself your humiliation was education. That hurt more than the conviction. He nodded. I know now. Knowing does not remove it. No. He picked up the block again. Can I keep trying anyway? Yes. That was the closest we came to a deep confession. It was enough because the next week he returned, and the week after that too. Conrad died in care 5 years after his stroke. Imogen notified Walter and me before the news became public. The stayed criminal proceedings ended. Civil judgments remained against his estate. Bianca received permission to attend a private funeral during supervised release. I did not attend. Walter chose to go. Why? I asked. To see whether I still need him to be large. At the cemetery, fewer than 20 people stood around Conrad's grave. Former executives avoided cameras. The empire once associated with his name had become separate companies, cleanup trusts, and court exhibits. Walter watched the coffin descend. He felt no triumph. He also felt no urge to bow. Afterward, Bianca approached him. They had not spoken since the lobby. Uncle Walter, she said, I am sorry for what I called you and Cyrus. Walter considered her. You learned those words from your father, he replied. You kept using them after you knew what they did. I know. Then build a life where you do not need them. He left without offering forgiveness on my behalf. Bianca completed custody and moved into supervised employment with a regional freight cooperative. Her first role involved checking invoices against deliveries, the exact work she once considered beneath her. She was not secretly brilliant after losing wealth. She made mistakes, received corrections, and learned. Her director ban prevented promotion into financial authority, but she became reliable at operations. She continued restitution and attended a program for people convicted of white-collar crime. Occasionally, tabloids photographed her taking a bus or eating in ordinary cafes. They framed normal life as degradation. I asked our publicist never to comment. Work was not humiliation. Lack of servants was not punishment. Her punishment came from the court. Her future came from what she did afterward. 5 years after the canceled wedding, she requested one final mediation session. I agreed after discussing it with Naomi and my therapist. Bianca arrived without jewelry. I noticed that fact and disliked myself for noticing. I will not ask you to forgive me, she said. I asked because I need to return something. She placed my mother's wedding brooch on the table. I had believed it remained in the Halcyon suite after I dropped it. Hotel records showed Bianca took it when she left. She kept it through the investigation, custody, and sale of her apartment. Why didn't you surrender it? I asked. At first because it was valuable. Later because it was the only object from that night that made me remember your face before I told myself you deserved it. You stole it. Yes. Did your attorney report it? This morning. If you want charges considered, I will not contest the facts. Naomi had already received the disclosure. The limitation period and value made prosecution unlikely, but that decision belonged to authorities, not private absolution. I picked up the brooch. One small pearl was missing. Did you love Trent? I asked. Bianca looked surprised. I loved how powerful I felt around him. I loved that he treated rules as things weaker people obeyed. I thought that was freedom because you always brought me consequences. And me? I loved being necessary to you. When you stopped needing my family, I called it betrayal. The answer was more honest than love or no. Why the bridal suite? To prove you would still marry me after seeing it. Trent wanted you to explode. I wanted you to stay. There it was, the cruelty beneath the thrill. She had wanted my acceptance to erase the possibility that I possessed a limit. I left, I said. Yes. I would leave again. I know. The mediation ended. We did not become friends. I did not promise another meeting. Bianca left through a different door. I took the brooch to a jeweler, replaced the missing pearl, and gave it to Walter. Your mother wanted you to have this, he said. She wore it when she married you, and you carried it into a wedding she would have stopped. He smiled sadly. Maybe we both misunderstood her. We decided to place it in the Margot Trust's archive beside her safety report, with no mention of Bianca or the hotel. The label described Margot as an engineer, not merely a victim, wife, or mother. That mattered. Sabine and I continued dating through all of this. We did not move in together after a dramatic rescue. We negotiated time like two adults with demanding work and separate identities. She served one final term as CFO, then moved to lead an infrastructure investment cooperative, so our relationship no longer required constant governance controls. Some employees assumed she left to prepare for marriage. She corrected them at her farewell speech. I am leaving because the cooperative offered a harder job, she said. Cyrus remains personally tolerable. I considered that a public declaration of love. 2 years later, we married in a small, civil ceremony after independent legal review. No one connected the event to a corporate succession plan. Walter attended as my father, not as a representative of gratitude. Naomi attended and refused to check the marriage documents a third time. Twice is enough, she said. That seems reckless. Sabine took the papers from me. Sign before he discovers a footnote. I did. Our marriage did not erase the bridal suite. It made that night smaller by giving it no authority over what came later. The next major test arrived without a villain. Meridian Forge had supplied high-tension fasteners for a suspension bridge on another continent. Routine fatigue testing found microscopic fractures in 3 bolts from the same production lot. None had failed in service, and engineers calculated that the bridge's redundant design could tolerate several failures without immediate danger. The old Cresswell procedure would have classified the result as an internal variance, replaced the sampled lot quietly, and waited for a customer to complain. Our procedure required a stop notice. Dr. Lane called me before dawn. If we announce before confirming the cause, every bolt we made that quarter will be questioned, she said. If we wait, we violate the notification clock we wrote ourselves. Then notify. I already did. That was the correct answer, and the fact that she did not require my permission mattered more than my agreement. By sunrise, the bridge authority had closed 2 lanes and begun inspections. Meridian Forge suspended shipments from the affected line. Our engineers traced the fractures to an alloy substitution by a certified supplier whose laboratory report appeared valid. The supplier had not falsified the report. Its spectrometer had drifted out of calibration after a software update, and nobody caught the change because 2 different quality checks relied on the same data feed. No bribes, no secret revenge, no criminal mastermind. Just a design that allowed one quiet error to confirm itself twice. The absence of malice did not make the bolt stronger. We expanded the recall to every lot tested through that instrument, paid for inspections, and sent mobile teams to 12 countries. The final cost reached $83 million. One customer terminated a contract. Another renewed because our notification arrived before its own sensors detected trouble. At the shareholder meeting, a fund manager accused me of using my mother's story to justify excessive caution. Would you have issued the same recall if your family had never dealt with Cresswell? He asked. I cannot rerun my life without that history, I answered. But our policy did not depend on my memory. Dr. Lane followed a rule approved by this board. If I had ordered silence, she had authority to notify regulators without me. He frowned. That sounds like management does not control its own company. It means management does not control physical facts. The vote on my compensation package came next. A majority approved it, but the safety committee removed my annual bonus because our supplier audit system had failed under my tenure. Sabine expected me to argue. I did not. Are you ill? She asked over dinner. I considered writing a 12-page objection. There you are. The recall exposed another weakness. The board still treated my willingness to accept bad news as a special virtue rather than an ordinary expectation. People praised me for not suppressing evidence. That standard was too low. I asked Naomi to help draft a charter, giving the quality director direct access to directors, external auditors, and regulators. It also protected any employee who stopped a line in good faith. The protection included wages during investigation and reinstatement unless deliberate misconduct was proved. Derek Yates, now an elected employee trustee, added a practical condition. A policy does nothing if a supervisor can punish someone with the night shift for using it, he said. We added independent review of schedule changes following safety reports. The final charter passed without my vote because I recused myself from changes affecting executive authority. Months later, an apprentice halted a line after hearing a sound no sensor recorded. Inspection found a bearing installed backward. Her supervisor thanked her in the morning briefing and recorded the saved repair cost beside the lost production hours. Nobody called the event heroic. It was simply the system working before a person had to become a martyr. The Margot Trust faced a different kind of test. A component maker called Blue Lantern Components applied for rescue financing after a flood destroyed its warehouse. It employed 400 people in a town where the next largest employer had closed. Its owners presented themselves as a family business threatened by indifferent banks. The public story was compelling. Walter wanted the trust to help. So did Marta. Independent reviewers found that Blue Lantern's owners had paid themselves large dividends during the 2 years before the flood and allowed insurance coverage to lapse. The company still had excellent workers, useful patents, and viable orders. Saving every owner's equity, however, would reward the decisions that caused the crisis. The trust proposed a conditional loan. The founding family would surrender voting control, employees would receive a meaningful ownership stake, and an outside turnaround team would publish monthly cash reports. The founders refused. They released a video accusing the Margot Trust of using tragedy to steal a small company. Several commentators compared me to Conrad. The comparison struck exactly where it was intended. I asked the trustees to approve the loan without the control condition. Marta stopped the meeting. You appointed us so this trust could resist powerful people, she said. I am asking you to preserve 400 jobs. You are asking us to preserve your reputation while calling it employment policy. Walter sat across the table. Years earlier, he would have agreed with whichever person seemed most dangerous. This time, he spoke slowly. Marta is right. I stared at him. The workers need help, he continued. The owners need consequences. Those are different needs. I withdrew my request. 2 weeks later, Blue Lantern entered formal restructuring. The trust financed a worker-led bid for the operating assets, but only after a court-appointed examiner confirmed the price and opened the sale to competitors. The founders lost control and most of their equity. The plant reopened under professional management with employees holding 30%. 17 positions were eliminated. 383 remained. It was not a perfect rescue. It was an honest one. The episode taught me that transparency could still be used as theater. Blue Lantern's owners had appeared in work clothes, filmed themselves beside damaged shelves, and told a true story about the flood. They omitted the equally true story of their dividends and uninsured risk. Facts did not become complete merely because each sentence was accurate. We changed the trust's application process so public claims made by applicants could be tested against their financial disclosures. We also created emergency wage loans paid directly to workers while ownership disputes were examined. That policy helped employees without converting urgency into leverage for executives. Walter turned 70 in the workshop at East Bank. He rejected a banquet, so the cooperative placed a long table between the sanding benches and covered it with paper. Former Cresswell employees brought food. Children from the primary school arrived carrying cards and complaining that the desks Walter built were too difficult to tip backward. That was intentional, he told them. One boy asked whether he had always made furniture. Walter looked at me before answering. No, for a long time I made excuses. The adults fell quiet. He held up his crooked first chair. This was the first useful thing I made after prison. One leg was short because I was afraid to cut the others again. Cyrus sat on it anyway. It nearly killed me, I said. That is dramatic. I learned it from a wealthy family. The room laughed. Walter did too. He gave the chair to the workshop archive on one condition. Visitors had to be allowed to sit in it. An object should do its job, he said, even when people decide it represents something. After the party, he and I walked along the edge of the remediated field. Young trees had been planted above soil that once held solvent drums. Monitoring wells still stood between them like blunt metal reminders. Do you think your mother would approve? Walter asked. Of the cleanup? Of us. She would review the data first. He smiled. That sounds like her. I had spent years trying to imagine Margot's verdict. Eventually, I understood that turning the dead into permanent judges was another way to avoid making my own choices. She had left principles and evidence, not instructions for every future conflict. I think she would ask what we plan to improve next, I said. Walter nodded toward a monitoring well. Then we should have an answer. Bianca completed restitution in the 8th year after the wedding was canceled. The court record showed every payment. There was no ceremony. Her cooperative confirmed the last transfer, and the supervision office closed her file. She sent one short message through Naomi. I have paid what the judgment required. I know that does not settle what could not be priced. I will not contact Cyrus again. I asked Naomi to place it with the mediation records. Do you feel finished? She asked. No. Good. Courts finish cases. People rarely finish consequences on schedule. Bianca later moved to another region and trained in transport compliance. Her history remained public. Some employers rejected her. One hired her with limited authority and dual approval requirements. She did not regain the life she had expected, but neither was she frozen forever in the bridal suite. That was not mercy I granted. It was a society deciding that accountability could have an end point without becoming amnesia. By then, Meridian Forge had outgrown the headquarters we inherited from Cresswell. Architects proposed a glass tower with my name on its foundation. I rejected both the tower and the name. We renovated 3 existing buildings near the plants and moved executive teams closer to operations. The old Cresswell boardroom became a training center for directors, union representatives, suppliers, and regulators studying failure systems. The first course used the bridal weekend collapse as a case study, but the title omitted every family name. Participants followed the sequence from false inventory to loan certification, duplicated collateral, safety notices, liquidity withdrawal, and court supervision. They were asked to identify the point where one honest decision could have reduced the damage. There was no single answer. A warehouse clerk could have challenged quantities. A lender could have inspected pledged equipment. A director could have demanded independent customer confirmation. Walter could have exposed coercion earlier. I could have separated my strategy from my engagement before the wedding week. Bianca could have refused to sign. Conrad could have stopped at any stage. The value of the exercise was not deciding which individual carried all blame. It was seeing how many doors had remained open before the final one slammed. On the 10th anniversary of Meridian Forge, the board began succession planning. I was 43, healthy, and still effective. Several directors assumed the process would identify a distant future replacement and then be forgotten. I proposed stepping down within 18 months. The room reacted as if I had announced an incurable disease. One director asked whether Sabine and I planned to relocate. Another wondered if litigation had emerged. A market analyst immediately speculated about marital trouble. The actual reason was simpler. If the company could not remain stable while its founder was alive, willing, and available for an orderly transition, then every speech I had given about institutions was advertising. Dr. Lane had led the recall, rebuilt research, and earned trust across plants. She understood the balance between engineering caution and commercial urgency. She also disagreed with me without making disagreement personal. The succession committee compared her with external candidates. I attended only the sessions where operational history was required and did not vote on the final choice. The board selected her. When the announcement became public, Meridian Forge shares fell 4%, recovered 2%, and remained there. I considered that an excellent result. On my last morning as chief executive, Dr. Lane entered the office carrying a folder. "Your proposal for the Southern casting expansion," she said. "Yes?" "I am canceling it." I stared at her. "The return profile is strong. It assumes water access the regional authority has not guaranteed. The risk committee agrees with me." The committee approved it 3 months ago, before the drought forecast changed. Every instinct that had made me successful began assembling an argument. I knew the forecasts, the permits, the customer demand, and the cost of delay. Then I noticed she was standing instead of asking permission. "Document the cancellation," I said, "and tell the board I objected." "I already wrote that you would." "You seem comfortable in the office." "I was until you arrived." She handed me the folder. The decision was supported by evidence. I signed the transition acknowledgement and left the executive key on the desk. Outside, employees had gathered in the courtyard. I expected speeches. Derek gave me a hard hat covered in signatures and told me the afternoon shift would start in 12 minutes whether I cried or not. Walter stood beside Sabine. He had grown thinner, and one hand trembled. But he remained upright without leaning on anyone. "Do you know what to do when you are not in charge?" he asked. "Explain why the new person is wrong." Sabine shook her head. "We will need stronger supervision." I became non-executive chair for 1 year, then left the board entirely. My retained shares moved into a diversified trust with voting limits. No child of mine could inherit control. Sabine and I had not decided whether to have children, but the governance could not wait for a private answer. Meridian Forge belonged to shareholders, employees, customers, and obligations defined by law. It was not a corrected version of the dynasty that had nearly consumed me. Leaving created an emptiness I had not anticipated. For most of my adult life, every day had contained an enemy, a deadline, or an institution at risk. Without executive authority, I reached for my phone during breakfast and found no crisis requiring me. Sabine watched me refresh the same news page twice. "You could develop a personality," she suggested. "At my age, the evidence is discouraging, but we can fund a pilot." I joined the Margot Trust only as an unpaid advisor and limited my attendance to 4 meetings a year. I taught a course with Freya Dalton, now a judge, about evidence in complex commercial cases. She focused on what prosecutors must prove. I focused on what boards convince themselves they do not need to know. Students preferred her lectures because she did not assign 80-page audit exhibits. Walter and I spent more time at the workshop. He could no longer operate the table saw safely, so he taught measuring and finishing. I became competent enough to construct a chair with 4 equal legs. He inspected it, rocked it twice, and found a mark beneath the seat. "What is this?" "A pencil line." "Careless." "Nobody can see it." "You can." I sanded it away. His health declined gradually. Years of untreated stress, prison care, and age had left damage that no courtroom could compensate. He refused to move into our house, but accepted an apartment in the same building after Sabine presented the arrangement as a contractual dispute she intended to win. One night he called because he could not find the bank key that had once opened Margot's evidence box. The investigations were over. The documents had been authenticated and archived. The key no longer opened anything important. To Walter, losing it felt like failing her again. Sabine found it inside the lining of his old coat. He held the small piece of metal and began to cry. I sat beside him. Without telling him, the key was unnecessary. Some objects did more than their practical jobs. The next morning, he asked me to return it to the archive. We placed it beside Margot's report and the repaired brooch. "Now I cannot lose it," he said. "Other people can." "You always improve," a comforting thought. "I learned that from my father." He smiled at the word. Walter died in his sleep the following winter. The doctor said it was peaceful. I distrusted the phrase because peace could not be measured from the outside, but there was no sign of pain. On his bedside table lay a workshop schedule, his glasses, and a list of 3 students who needed help completing their certification. No final confession waited for me. No hidden recording revealed another conspiracy. He had said what he was able to say while alive. We buried him beside Margot. Former factory workers, workshop students, lawyers, engineers, and people from East Bank attended. Bianca sent flowers through the freight cooperative. I did not remove them. I did not read a secret meaning into them either. At the service, I spoke about Walter's failures before I spoke about his repair. My father obeyed people who harmed others, I said. He also learned that shame is not the same as accountability. Shame tells us to hide. Accountability tells us to return tomorrow and do the next necessary thing. The workshop students carried his crooked chair to the front and placed it beside the grave. Afterward, they took it back. Walter had insisted that useful objects remain useful. Grief did not arrive like revenge. It had no target and offered no leverage. For months, I noticed absences in ordinary places. An empty workshop stool, an unanswered message about a loose hinge, a birthday reminder that no calendar knew to remove. Sabine never told me to move on. She asked what I missed that day. The answer changed. Sometimes I missed the father Walter became. Sometimes I mourned the father he had failed to be. Both men were real, and loving one did not acquit the other. The Margot Renwick Center opened the next spring in the renovated Cresswell Board Building. Its purpose was not to preserve my family's story. The center trained employees, lenders, public officials, and small company directors to recognize coercive governance, false collateral, safety report suppression, and conflicts between medical incapacity and corporate control. The central exhibit contained no wax figures and no recreation of the bridal suite. Visitors saw documents. Margot's original safety report stood beside the altered version bearing Walter's signature. A screen showed both documents line by line. Another display traced the dispatch sheet, paint analysis, pager messages, mileage log, and bank transfers that allowed a jury to understand the attack on her vehicle without pretending any single item proved everything. The Cresswell restructuring exhibit included the genuine cure notices, inventory corrections, court orders, employee claims, and creditor recoveries. It explained that the company did not vanish during one phone call. It failed through accumulated falsehoods, then changed through legal processes involving thousands of people. Bianca's affair appeared in one sentence on the opening timeline because it triggered my departure from the hotel. It was not presented as the cause of insolvency. Conrad's medical records did not appear. Imogen's guardianship report was summarized only to explain why the criminal court stayed proceedings. His dignity did not depend on his innocence, and his guilt did not erase his patient rights. Malcolm's section distinguished proven charges from rumors that had circulated online. Trent's videos were absent. The center was not a museum of humiliation. At the opening, a reporter asked whether the exhibits were my final revenge against the Cresswells. Revenge requires an audience to remember the enemy, I said. This center asks people to remember the warning signs. But your actions destroyed their empire. Their fraud destroyed the enterprise they controlled. Courts separated viable operations from the people who abused them. Employees built what survived. The distinction made a poor headline. The reporter used the revenge quote anyway. I had learned that accuracy did not guarantee control over interpretation. Our responsibility was to make records available, correct material errors, and refuse to manufacture a cleaner myth in response. After the crowd left, I walked through the exhibit alone. The repaired brooch reflected light from its glass case. Beside it, the label identified Margot as a process engineer who documented unsafe disposal and resisted falsification. Walter's bank key rested beneath a note explaining that he preserved evidence after helping conceal it. Neither description was complete. No label could contain a person. In the former boardroom, a group of new directors studied the bridge fastener recall. Dr. Lane had permitted the center to publish Meridian Forge's internal failure map after customer details were removed. The students argued about whether redundant tests counted as independent if they shared software. Nobody noticed me at the door. One participant insisted the chief executive should retain power to delay public notice until engineers reached certainty. Another pointed to the cost of waiting when uncertainty involved public safety. Their instructor asked the question I had once avoided. Who benefits from silence during the delay, and who carries the risk? The discussion continued without my answer. That was the point. Years after I left management, Meridian Forge encountered a downturn. Orders fell, energy prices rose, and an activist investor demanded plant closures. Newspapers predicted Dr. Lane would seek my intervention. She did not. The board negotiated temporary hour reductions, executive pay cuts, and a sale of non-essential land. Employee trustees rejected the first proposal and approved the third after changes. 2 facilities merged. No secret account rescued everyone, and not every job survived. The company remained solvent. I disagreed with parts of the plan. I wrote my concerns in a private letter to the chair and accepted the board's decision. 6 months later, demand recovered enough to restore hours. Dr. Lane expanded the apprenticeship program before dividends. Meridian Forge had made hard choices without asking which choice would please me. For the first time, I knew it could outlive me. On our wedding anniversary, Sabine and I attended a conference at the Halcyon Hotel. The organizers had booked the same floor where my first wedding was meant to begin. I recognized the corridor before I saw the room numbers. The carpet had changed. The brass fixtures had been replaced. A service cart stood near the old bridal suite, and a housekeeper complained that one wheel pulled to the left. Sabine watched my face. "Do you want another floor?" she asked. No. I did not enter the suite. I did not need to reclaim it, bless it, or prove indifference by sleeping inside. It was a hotel room where 2 people had betrayed me, and where I had finally stopped betraying myself. We continued to the elevator. At dinner, the conference host introduced me as the man who had destroyed a dynasty after catching his fiancée cheating. The audience applauded the clean version. When I reached the lectern, I changed the first slide. It showed a factory ledger with inventory quantities written in 3 different inks. "The affair ended a wedding," I said. "This destroyed the dynasty." I showed the altered laboratory report, the double-pledged equipment schedules, the lender certifications, and the cure notices. Then I showed Margot's report and Walter's signature beneath words he had not written. An empire built on obedience looks powerful because every person inside it has learned to make danger invisible. Its collapse appears sudden only to people who ignored the records. I told them about Bianca signing false documents, Conrad turning family loyalty into control, Malcolm purchasing silence, Trent treating attention as immunity, and my own decision to wait until a wedding week to separate private truth from corporate exposure. I had evidence earlier, I said. I delayed because part of me wanted the moment to feel decisive. That choice increased risk. Do not confuse a satisfying story with a responsible timeline. The room grew quieter. I finished with the apprentice who stopped a production line because a bearing sounded wrong. She had no hidden fortune, famous family, or revenge plan. She heard a problem, possessed authority to act, and knew the system would protect her if she was mistaken. That was more important than anything I did in the hotel. After the talk, a young man waited near the stage. He said his family owned a distribution company and expected him to sign loan documents he had not reviewed. "They say asking questions proves I do not trust them," he said. "Trust is not a substitute for reading. What if they remove me from the company?" I thought of Walter carrying photographs into a prison visit, Bianca mistaking necessity for love, and myself wearing a wedding suit while preparing legal notices. Then learn what the signature makes you responsible for before deciding what the position is worth. I gave him the center's contact information and told him to obtain independent counsel. I did not tell him to destroy his family. I did not know whether they were dishonest. Refusing blind obedience was not the same as declaring war. Sabine joined me after he left. "You ruined the revenge speech," she said. "They can request a refund. The conference paid your fee to the East Bank Monitoring Trust. Marta will not return it. Then my reputation is trapped." We took the elevator down. The doors opened onto a lobby filled with strangers beginning weddings, ending meetings, checking invoices, and dragging luggage toward ordinary lives. Nobody knew which room had once held the worst hour of mine. Outside, rain had polished the street. Sabine opened an umbrella and held it too far to her side. "You are getting me wet," I said. "Submit a formal complaint." I moved closer instead. The Cresswell name still existed in court archives. Holloway Capital survived only as a chain of liquidated entities and cautionary exhibits. Bianca carried what she had done without carrying my future. Trent's noise faded. Conrad and Malcolm could no longer command anyone. Walter and Margot were gone, but the records they left continued to teach people who had never met them. I once believed victory would be the instant every person who humiliated us lost everything. That belief belonged to the same world as Conrad's empire, a world where power meant deciding who was allowed to stand. What followed was slower and less perfect. Creditors recovered unequal amounts. Workers changed careers. Polluted water took years to clear. Courts corrected some judgments and could not repair every injury. My father earned trust he could not demand. I learned that leaving a cruel relationship was only the first boundary. The harder work was refusing to rebuild cruelty with myself at the center. The empire ended when enough people stopped turning obedience into proof of love. What replaced it did not belong to me. That was why it could last.